ready to call to order this September 17th, 2019 Parks, Trails, and Lakes Commission regular meeting. Jamie, can I get a roll call?
Tim Gary,
Present.
Karen Moorhead,
Here.
Tim Miller,
Here.
Jason Steenblock,
Here.
Doug Ramseth,
Here.
Terry Steenblock, and Jack McKenzie.
All right, moving on. Looks like no one here for the open forum.
Oh, darn it.
I checked the list when I walked in, but no one
I
signed
think
up
we're
there.
good without the open forum tonight, unfortunately.
All right. That's right, we had to add number 3 here. I'm looking for a motion to accept tonight's agenda.
I move that we approve the agenda with the exception of removing the July 2nd minutes from the agenda.
Second?
Having a second, any discussion on that other than what we have?
Just chair and members of the commission, if we can just add item 3, just approve the agenda. It was just a little typo on that, so if you can, Doug, maybe amend your a motion to add number 3, so it says on there, approve agenda.
And then move all the rest down,
Correct.
even though I already did this one.
I move to amend my original motion to be what Jamie said.
Second.
And then Karen would have to
I
second.
was just gonna say, I think I have to second, but that's fine with me.
Second,
Okay.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Abstain? All right, we already checked with the open forum, out of turn a little bit, but moving on to the regular agenda action items. We're looking for a motion to approve meeting minutes from April 16th, 2019.
So move.
Second?
Having a second, do we have any discussion items on these meeting minutes? Hearing no discussion, I'd like to ask all in favor of approving, say aye.
Aye.
Against? Abstain. For the record, I do approve.
Same. You were approved?
Approve, yeah.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to meetings, minutes number 2. We have a motion to accept May 21st, 2019 meeting minutes as provided on the separate cover.
So move.
Second?
Any discussion items on that? Hearing no discussion, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Against? Abstain? All right, let's move on to the meeting time. Jamie?
Chair and members of Parks, Trails, and Lakes Commission, included in the packet tonight is a staff memo discussing the meeting time for our Parks, Trails, and Lakes Commission meetings for the remainder of the year. And just as a reminder, we did move earlier this year to adjust our start time from 6 p.m. To a 5 p.m. start to accommodate for the summer months with Arts in the Park. And so commissioners could attend that. That was a motion made to continue that 5 o'clock through September and reevaluate at that time. So tonight, just looking to see if the Parks, Trails, and Lakes Commission prefer to continue at the 5 o'clock start time, or if we should return to 6 p.m. And just kind of taking into consideration different schedules that people may have that would allow them to attend. So with that, if there's any questions, otherwise we would be looking for discussion and action tonight on meeting time for the rest of 2019.
Doesn't matter to me, but if somebody has a conflict, this would be a good time to recognize it.
No, I think we've briefly talked about it before. I was the one that really requested we look at it again after the school year started. It's working out good for me, so 5 o'clock is fine from my end. Now, with the second question, Arts in the Park, it'd be kind of, it would be nice to not have Jamie running around so much. But that said, I know Tuesdays have probably been the norm for a long time, so anyone have any thoughts on that, or?
Yeah, I think that's actually a good point, and I don't know if this is something that needs to come up with city staff or council, if there's an opportunity to look at the meeting schedule when that's being set for next year, if there's an opportunity to consider Wednesdays, if that's an option, or just a different day of the week that wouldn't be in conflict. And I know that there are some, like, planning commission meets periodically, but we'd have to look at that city calendar and I think discuss with staff and council if there is something there. Otherwise, we would have to, I think it would be smart to change from a Tuesday meeting in the summer months, because it is pretty important that I'm at the park, and even having those 5 o'clock meetings in the summer on a Tuesday is still difficult to accommodate. So I think I can check with city council or staff to see if there's any options. Otherwise, just for those June, July, and August months next year, I would recommend switching that from a Tuesday to a different meeting date, just for those months at a minimum.
No, it's always been convenient for me because I look at that as part of my Arts in the Park, and so I come to the meeting, then go down to Arts in the Park but I go to a lot of them. I don't know if everybody goes to a lot of them, and so another night. But who is the person who runs the farmer's market down there? Emma or not Emma?
We do have one part-time seasonal, but I think as the event has grown, there's a lot of different moving parts and more vendors and food trucks to coordinate. So it's nice to be able to be there. It really depends on the concert series as well. Some of the bands require a lot more attention and setup and prep that sometimes I'm at the park at 2 o'clock if that staff member hasn't started until 3 o'clock. And I'm the one that's kind of in more communication with bands. A good example is the Zed Leplin group. They had quite a production and early setup and a lot of intricate pieces of the agreement that we had to follow. So that was one where it was really challenging. August 20th that I had to be down at the park fairly early, and was difficult to leave when there's thousands of, a couple thousand people in the park, which is great. But so just something to think about. And I don't know that we need the answer today on that, but if there's any other thoughts or comments around that, it's good to get some feedback so I can follow up with that with staff.
I guess it sounds like a good idea, because you're needed at the park. So if we could maybe alter those three months for a different day, it would probably ease a little bit of your pain also.
Shouldn't, maybe we look at getting a motion today to continue the 5 o'clock time going forward, and then have Jamie look into the conflict, because I don't know if that schedule is something that city council needs to set either, or if that's something that we can make that, determination. So maybe does that seem like that'd be a fair way to,
Right now, we're just looking at the.
Yeah.
just the change from the 5 o'clock for,
So I'll make a motion to stay with the 5 o'clock start time, and then have Jamie look at, for the Arts in the Park, the 3 months, to see if we can change that at a later date.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any other discussion on it? All right, we'll take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Against? Abstain. Motion carries. No more action items on the agenda here, so let's move on to number 5, discussion items, and we'll start at Belts Park Master Plan.
All right, thank you. Chair and members of Parks, Trails, and Lakes Commission. Before you this evening, and included in the agenda packet, is your first look at the cost analysis that Bolton and Menk put together for the city as we've worked through this Belts Park Master Plan. And tonight we're looking at just kind of keep the conversation pretty high level, but as you'll see in the cost analysis, the first page is the all-in cost, and I just want to clarify that this is a starting point to give you a ballpark estimate. If you remember in May when we had Bolton and Menk present to the Parks, Trails, and Lakes Commission, and when we talked about the different amenities that we were interested in, it was noted that once we get into the specifics of selecting shelters and playground equipment, there's a whole range of a whole cost range there. So you can have a lower end cost, good quality product that'll meet the needs of the community, or you can have your top end, extremely elaborate structure. So Bolton and Mink put this together. I don't know the specifics of where they landed. So I would expect this to just, not be set in stone by any means. It's just a guide to kind of gauge the conversation. I thought it would be helpful to see this in a phased approach, given that we do have some constraints on our budget of what's available to us now and predicting what may be available in the future. So what they provided were 2 different phased approach options. The first one is a 2-phase approach. So you'll see listed that they have phase 1 being the playground improvement with the sidewalk accessibility. So that's if we would consider kind of looking at a 2-phase approach. It's broken down in those 2 components. If you continue in the packet, you'll then also see that they provided a 3-phase approach. So that lists phase 1 improvements as accessibility and playground improvements. The second phase they would recommend would be the pavilion and park entrance. And then the third phase would be the sports facility improvements. So what we talked about with the multi-use sport courts, basketball, tennis court improvements. So they did provide a few different options, and Bolton and Mink is just kind of looking for some initial feedback, thoughts from the Parks, Trails, and Lakes Commission. And I did want to note that the phase 1 improvements, whether we would consider a 2-phase or 3-phase approach, is the same cost and plan. So phase 1, regardless of how we would go about this or continue the conversations, would be the playground for inclusivity and the sidewalk access points throughout the park.
So, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, would that not include then the bathroom?
The bathroom would be included in the pavilion. So the park pavilion and entrance,
Would be in phase 1?
No.
No.
it would not. And this is, again, a starting point for discussion, what Bolton and Mink provided. And also, I think it aligns with our current resources we have available and some other funding opportunities. So I do think that the phase 1 is something that is realistic to complete for 2020. A couple things to note, we talked about the DNR Outdoor Recreation Grant. That application generally opens in December and is due in March of 2020. And they generally look for applications improving accessibility and safety. So I think that we would still have a strong application for that phase 1 part of the project. And then secondly, the Rotary also did their fundraising event with some of those funds dedicated to inclusive playground, which would also be applicable to the phase 1 portion of this project. So with that, I think, just looking for some initial discussion and thoughts on this. Obviously, the phase 2 or the phase 2 and 3 are pretty expensive components, and we don't know at this time when we'd have that funding, but I think the project, you could move forward with the phase 1 and work on aligning some resources to the additional part of the project, so that we can continue moving this forward. I know in our in our recent workshop, Belts Park was one of the top priorities for this group to continue working on this project. So, I think talking about that phase 1 and what that looks like for next year, and then I think as part of the whole city strategic planning and developing a 10-year plan for infrastructure and improvements, there are going to be quite a bit of conversations on all of the key identified projects that we would like to complete based on community input, and how do we accomplish that, with the revenue stream we have of park dedication funds. So with that, I'm happy to take some initial questions and some discussion on that, and I'll turn it over to you guys for any questions at this time.
Jamie, I have a comment. This started with the PAC committee from the high school. And the things that they were interested in are in phase 2 and 3. So the way it's positioned here, phase 1 is for the playground and for the little kids and the walking path and such. But then it's not clear if and when the rest, phase 2 and then phase 3 with the things that they were interested in would be forthcoming. So I think they would be disappointed in not having, and not being able to see when, if and when the things they were interested in would occur.
Going along with that, I agree 100% with that, and I think we allowed them to feel like they were important and we're going to do something. But along with them, the community surveys that came back, bathroom situation was really high. So that's two things. And then the third thing was that was really high with making an agreement with the church because of, we all heard the abuse of the bathroom situation there because there is no, I mean, unless you want to go into that ugly little thing, there's really no bathroom there. And so again, I think I was looking at the miscellaneous things that are in one, and if you get rid of some of those, you're not near as far apart. So I would like to look at maybe combining 1 and 2 somehow and taking out things that I didn't hear anybody ask about, and then maybe trying to give a little bit more credence to the high school group that was working with us for this. Is that possible?
Yeah, yep, absolutely. This is, again, a starting point, like you said, for discussion, and I think those are great points to consider. And in a little bit, once we get through any initial comments, I can pull up our park dedication account information too, to kind of put some numbers in and show you where we're at and how things might change depending on which approach we go with. Obviously, I would need to consult with Bolton and Mank on if we did change what the phases consisted of based on some feedback tonight. I'm sure they can reconstruct the cost analysis if it's just, let's focus on the restroom pavilion structure first, because I think that's covering the bathrooms and the pavilion. That focal piece of the park was a big component the PAC group is interested in. So that's certainly, I think, something that we can reconstruct and figure out how that might fit as a phase 1 with the playground or something else being 2 or 3. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and then ornamental trees, I mean, I didn't hear anybody say if you wanted any in there, what, 3,000 something?
Yeah, I think that's again, them just putting their recommendation forward to deliver a good project on the landscaping piece. So trees and selecting types of trees is not my area of expertise. So I think that there are some things in here that we certainly could look at and say yes or no to. For example, when you see the additional improvements, the fence, chain link, and that assumes replacement of perimeter fence. Well, I know a lot of our other parks don't have a fence around it. So my thought was, okay, can we scratch that? And that's just something that we'll work through this in this process. We don't want to have that perimeter fence reestablished. We'll just take that down and leave it down, make some more inviting space. And so that's just one example of, we'll go through this and say there are some things that are not applicable. Another thing that I noted was, even with like the playground equipment, I know we've talked a lot about poured in place surfacing as our new standard. Given that surface area, that's a pretty big ticket item, $150,000. So some cities and communities do partial poured in place. So where there's the accessible equipment or in certain areas, they'll save costs by doing poured in place just in those sections, with the rest being like the engineered wood fiber. Right. So I think that's something that we'll be able to work through and say, those are decisions we'll make in this process. But I think for tonight, I think that's a good initial point of maybe we think about, can we do the structure first, the pavilion with the bathrooms, and then kind of rearrange how we. That
building threw me for a loop just on here. They're showing $300 dollars per square foot billed at 2,000 square feet, and they're showing 500,000, when to me that math is 600,000, but
Yeah.
I don't think it should be that expensive
No,
anyways
and-
to build it. So, I mean, we build
I agree.
every day for less than 150 a square, so.
Yep, the other thing I was thinking about is, would we be able to partner with the Forest Lake High School and their building project?
Right.
That would be
Right.
really a cool thing
Yeah.
if we could do
For
that.
the kids to,
Yeah.
oh,
For the kids,
yeah.
it would be hands-on also.
Rather than building a house, build a
Yep.
pavilion, because it's gonna be basically the same sort of skills and
That'd
learning.
be an excellent way to,
That's an excellent
And then we'd be
point.
able to work on it that way.
I don't know what they're doing this year, if they have a project, but that's great.
We have at Lakeside Park a fantastic playground for the younger children. And there is playground equipment for younger children at Bells Park now. So to me, that could be a Phase 3 item and move some of the other items from Phase 3 up closer to the front.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because, yeah, we've done a pretty good job of setting things up for the little kids, but I still haven't done anything with the teenagers, and that's what we're really trying to focus on.
Right.
So I would put all the stuff for all the equipment and things for the high school and put that in Phase 1.
Good.
So with that, you would like to look at the cost and see if we can maybe get that building construction cost down with
Yep.
potential materials, but also maybe labor with a partnership opportunity with the sports facility improvements as kind of the first effort and focus.
Yes.
Okay, that's good. I can let them know of that. Karen?
Are we keeping any of the playground equipment that's there now? Because, again, there are some for little kids, but that one where you climb on the mesh, where the thing is, I didn't know, are we taking all of that equipment out and doing all new, or is some of that gonna stay? I suppose it can't if it's a new platform, huh?
The conversation that this group's had along with the political action committee was the intent was to put all new equipment in as part of the improvement project and then relocate or figure out what that plan would be with the existing equipment, not throw it in the garbage or anything like that, but is there another park location to repurpose that? That has not been determined on what we would do, but the intent has been to put all new equipment in at that location as part of the master plan and improvement project.
Okay.
So I'll pull up on my screen just to kind of talk a little bit about numbers and kind of see where we think we might be able to get, or kind of in this Phase 1, kind of look at some numbers here. And this is estimated. So this is our park dedication account where we can fund our park improvement project. So I'll kind of just walk you through kind of high level where we're at with everything. So first, we will be free of the Fenway loan. We are essentially free of that Fenway loan at this time. So I think that's very exciting and notable and will allow for some progress. So anytime any additional development comes forward, 100% of those park dedication fees will now be available for park improvements. So that's, just wanted to note that as we're moving forward. So what you see here, this column D is where we ended kind of at the end of last year. So you'll see that our fund balance at the end of last year was this $279,330. What I have in here, you'll see column F is a 2019 estimate. So this number here, the 300,341, that's actually a pretty good estimate of, to date, estimate of what we should have available for park spending, what's come in this year for park dedication fees. Aside from, not factoring anything with the loan, like that should be coming in and available as park improvement fund dollars. We do have a few things that we've budgeted for. You'll see here the capital outlay That was part of our expense for Lakeside Memorial Park, so that's listed as an expense for this year. And then also the 25,000, it's listed here as an expense for the Belts Park master planning, but the revenue was offset with that. But from an accounting standpoint, it has to be noted here. So you'll see our total expenditures. So the fund balance at the end of this year, if we would not receive any more park dedication funds or have any more expenses going out, we would be looking at this $448,248. So that would be our current end of year balance for park dedication, given those parameters I outlined. So kind of looking to 2020, what we did here is we put in an estimate of $150,000 in park dedication fees, and there's really no magic formula to project what this number could be. It's 100% dependent on development in the community. That number just seemed to be a fair estimate, just kind of based on some calculations we did on averages of what we've received over the years. So assuming we get the $150,000 in park dedication next year, you'll see I listed a capital outlay for 2020 of $370,000. So that includes what we budgeted for in our CIP for next year. We put in the budget $300,000 for the Belts Park redevelopment project, and also $70,000 for a Cedar Park parking lot, which we'll talk about next on our agenda. So it kind of shows you if we do spend that amount at the end of next year, assuming those, again, calculations, we would still have $226,000 available. So it kind of shows you we can, maybe we end up spending, $400,000 next year on Cedar Park, Belts Park. We still have that 126 available. So I think it kind of allows us the opportunity to kind of gauge where we think that phase one cost estimate will need to be, given this funding source. And I think that what will be the challenge and work of the commission will be, what we're comfortable with. This isn't factoring in any donations or grant opportunities. This is just, if we spent that money. So hopefully that gives you a little idea of kind of what ballpark cost estimates we could be in for this first phase of the project.
Mr. Chairman, I think I know the answer to this, but when it became a Park, Lakes and Trails Commission, you lost your ability to spend your park land dedication. That was the only thing before that the park board could make independent decisions on, was there? But now it has to go through the city council.
Correct. So you, as a commission, are the experts and know what the community is looking for and are kind of doing that homework of what you would recommend on behalf of the city. So yours is a recommendation to city council to pursue this project at this dollar amount. So everything does go to city council for a final approval on this expenditure. But it is still all of it comes from the commission. Council's not the ones out there. They're very aware of what is happening and going on in the community, but, you're the ones recommending to council what action you think should be taken.
I'm sure they're hearing about much more than just parks.
A lot more than parks. So it's your specialty, and that's why we have commissions in place to be, to kind of help guide the improvements and developments in parks, trails, and lakes in the community. So, does that
It's
clarify?
good- Yeah, and it's good that our liaison is nice enough to come to hear all the different conversations, because there's a lot that goes on and said here that it's hard to get all them to understand, so that's good.
Absolutely. It's very important.
And we don't have the ability to spend it, and we didn't have any money when I was on before, but we could have spent it if we had it. So it's just kind
Well,
of-
and I think we've been, slowly working on getting rid of that Fenway loan, and we're there. And now it's a great time because we're, as a commission and as a city, strategically looking at how, I don't want to say get caught up, but there are a lot of projects that didn't get done over the last couple of years. Southview Park, we made an effort at that, which was not approved. We removed equipment at Bay Park. That was not replaced, so that park currently sits vacant. And I think, through our workshop, we identified some of those top bigger capital improvement projects. Expansion at Fenway Park, lights at Fenway and just to kind of trail development, just to name a few from that list we generated, aside from neighborhood park improvements as well. So, this kind of paints the picture that we can focus on the phase one part of a project and have money available to make progress next year.
Say, Jamie, why did the income this year double over all the other years?
You're talking about how we got to this number?
Yeah, the 300,000.
More development, and with the Fenway loan being paid off now, that takes into account, we only owed, I believe, like $129,000 to the Fenway loan for 2019. So currently we have about $420,000 in park dedication fees for this year.
Right.
So this is the amount that would reflect being debt-free from that and now available this year.
And projects on the horizon are about normal. There's nothing big coming in.
Normal, nothing big coming in that I've been notified of. We've had, I think we've had quite a bit of development in the community, which has gotten us to where we are with having that loan paid off. And we do have some money to work with and make some park improvements. So I hope this is just helpful to kind of gauge a little bit, and if there's any other numbers you want me to swap out or.
You wanna go ahead?
Is it okay? The one question I have is on the parking lot, the $70,000 parking lot. Is there any way that we could move that into the Belts Fund instead of using it as, a gravel parking lot works just fine. Can we move those funds into that?
Well, we can certainly talk about that at the next agenda item, but it's recommended, it was, the Cedar Park parking lot was identified as a CIP project to do in 2020 in conjunction with the street project that's taking place right there. There have been previous challenges, and I have some pictures of, I shared with pictures of the parking lot. We had complaints of people not parking in the gravel area and driving up kind of into the park, and it would just be a nice improvement to have a defined parking lot there. So that would be slated for next year, and again, we'll talk about that. But this is just kind of what we've budgeted for and planned. There is still potentially the opportunity if you want to forego that, but I think, again, that's just earmarked for that at this point.
And do you let bids then for that work? I mean, is that a city maintenance?
Yeah, so we can talk about that in the next agenda item, but that is something that is primarily led through our Public Works Department with our city engineer, the bidding and all of that process.
I've got a question on the revenue and expenditures. I see we've got the 25,000 that was for the Bolton and Bank. You said that for accounting purposes would put in as an expenditure. Where did that come in for revenue then? Or, because didn't we receive
We
the
did.
city council gave us money from the surplus for that?
Yes, so, and the 2018 surplus, there was a transfer in, not in the accounting world, but that is factored in, and I can follow up if you have any more specific questions. But I was informed that will have to come out there, but it has been allocated for as revenue.
Certainly. It might be nice to see where that, because, when we're
Yep.
talking about the park dedication fees as a revenue.
Right.
We've got that number, and that should, by the end of the year, be finalized and be exact. And then we would have whatever our loan payment was, which historically was 50%. That should be shown as an expenditure. And then,
Yep, and that's all
just to understand wwhere it's coming and going, but.
Yeah, I can get I know exactly what you're speaking of. I can have some reports pulled from our system. This is just our, kind of our working document, but everything is tracked through our accounting software that we run for the city. So you're just looking for more of a formal report, which is no problem to provide. This is more kind of the high-level discussion, easy to look at from a discussion standpoint. But I know what you're talking about and can get some follow-up on that.
I mean, the only other comment there is if we were to go forth with a 3-year plan, we better hope there's some more money coming in or some grants, because it doesn't look, based on these projections, that we'd even have enough money to complete the project. And to me, when you start a phased plan, you are seeing it to the end. So I think we've got to certainly look at that. Maybe the capital improvements subcommittee here can maybe look at some of the things we've talked about today too, with port in place, maybe not everywhere, maybe coming up with a different phasing schedule for that, and then maybe come back on the next meeting and discuss it some more.
Yes, and I think that, I know that the city council is working on the budget preparations, and once that's cleared, I know that the city is also going to start talking about a 10-year infrastructure plan. I know there was a lot of interest in improvements for parks and trails from the strategic planning sessions, and I think there will be more conversations in the near future in conjunction with city council on, I think a key component of that was identifying a revenue or funding source to support those, because otherwise you can talk about them or have these visions, but how do you bring those to reality? So I think that's a lot more conversation to take place with city staff and council, potentially even, I know with Bolton and Mank as part of the master plan process, we did have on there a joint workshop in October with Parks Commission and City Council. So to continue, going through what we're going through now of taking a look at the numbers, talking about where the priorities are. We can also share the CIP list generated at the workshop, and then hopefully we can get a joint workshop with council and, have further conversations with city staff, because it's going to take more than our power with what we are able to do to figure out how to fund these big projects that, everyone's really interested in and looking forward to in the community based on Parks Commission's community input sessions and strategic planning as well. So I think it kind of shows that there are some gaps in resources if we are going to pursue some of these projects, and there's, more conversations to have on what are some of those other creative ways to find some funding for these improvements.
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful too to find out maybe if, once we kind of fine tune the phasing, what they think for a time frame. And then so we know, like, when would we need to get this thing approved through all the channels so that we could start in 2020 if that's the goal. So I think that's something to maybe put when they do, if they relook at a phase plan and incorporate some of those, the important items to pack and that we understand what they think a reasonable time frame would be, so we know when we got to start, since our build schedule or time is so short here in Minnesota. So anybody else got any other comments on that one, or should we move on to 5B, Cedar Park parking lot?
All right, now we can
Yeah.
kind
Now we
of go
can
into
talk-
the
now we
Cedar
can
Park.
talk about that
I'm
one.
sorry about that.
No, that's okay. Just wanted to
Always ahead of yourself.
let you know we would cover that in a little more detail. So let's pull these up here. So I did send over a few pictures in an email, and I'll pull these up on the screen for anybody to see.
Yeah. It's, yeah,
So in just a second, some pictures will pop up on the monitors as well. But as mentioned, we had a couple years ago had done some priority planning for CIP and identified with the commission at that time that adding a parking lot at Cedar Park would be a good thing to do. Some pictures to kind of show you of what we're working with currently. When it's busy, there are quite a few cars here, and some people pull up kind of into the grass. Some people are parking, alongside the park here, as you see, and there's really no structure to that. So in working with Public Works, they did note or let us know that they do have a planned street project on 7th Avenue coming up next year. So that's why we had slated this for 2020. And it really saves the Parks Commission or the city a lot of cost if we would do this parking lot now, because they're going to already be there. There's the mobilization, equipment, everything's already going to be in that area for the street project. So this was something we had planned for next year at $70,000. I think it would be a nice improvement, given that we've really done some nice upgrades to Cedar Park. And, part of it was a safety thing if cars are pulling up too far into the grass. Obviously, you see there's some water retaining there. And so that's where the Parks Commission had settled. It's certainly open for discussion, but what our city engineer is looking for is just some feedback, a high-level description of, what that parking lot would look like, how many spaces, do you just want parking right in front or make that whole area a parking lot? So looking for, and I kind of took some pictures here so you could see where the end of the existing road is, if it's something that's just extended out. So just looking for some discussion on this. If you have any input on what you'd like to see there for this project.
The 70,000, so how big of a space have they set up for parking? Is it just the gravel that's there now? Or are they taking out the blacktop and
Yeah, is it
redoing?
that whole piece there?
They
that's
wouldn't
shown?
take out the blacktop. I think this would be over the gravel in addition. They would not remove that
Okay,
blacktop
so-
from my
so
understanding.
It's just gonna be blacktopping the gravel spot. And then, does that?
Striping,
And then does the 70,000 include striping or not?
it would include, I believe, everything for that.
Okay.
Is that Seventh? That's the pavement that's showing there? Is that Seventh?
This is the,
That's Second Avenue.
yeah,
is
that's
that
Second
right?
Avenue. So as you,
Okay.
so you can maybe, let's see if I have a better picture for you. Yeah, that's Second Avenue and Seventh is perpendicular to there.
Okay.
Yeah, there.
Certainly, it's something that should be kind of cleaned up, and I don't know how much room you have, how much they going to spend on it, but
What,
it's
yeah,
definitely
I agree with you.
not good looking there. But 70,000 is 70,000.
70,000, 70,000. And, I don't know, for some reason, I guess I'm thinking the other way. We could put up, the posts, like in Cooling Camp, and the wire.
Yep.
And
Yep.
put down gravel,
Right.
because we're tarring or cementing everything. And I guess I don't have a problem with just putting gravel down, so you still have water drainage through there, and you have a nice
Right.
gravel parking lot with a wire and posts.
Because I'd be curious about, what the difference in price would be between the gravel and the blacktop. I mean, I know it's significant, but I mean, it'd be curious just to see. Because if you could get by with posting in wire cable, then now you don't have cars driving, where they're not supposed to be. You've got a permeable surface there, so you're not gonna have runoff and flooding and whatever else. But I guess I'd lean more towards gravel than the blacktop, and then save the blacktop for belts.
Yep.
I'd be curious of, what they're giving us at that price and where that price, I don't know if that was a ballpark kind of, Dave or whoever over in Park, whoever, or city might be that said, I think it's gonna be about this. Certainly be nice to vet that out, what the options are. I think as part of our, kind of the overall plan to beautify the city, I think it would be important to do something there. We talked at the workshop, this is a park that we've heard rumblings that people come to visit from outside the city as well. It's a, popular place to be, so it's a destination to have. I think it'd be important, and the safety factor. But I would agree too, I think you could potentially, depending on what that overall cost difference is, you could potentially get what you want out of gravel. I think more defined lines and curbs and, something, fence posts or something might do the trick. We may find that it's not that much different with the asphalt equipment being there, I don't know, and maybe we need to get a more formalized price together for that. I don't know what the options are for getting kind of somebody to draw that up, or do we draw it on a napkin, do we, something like that?
We can be
and
a
say,
little-
hey, what is this gonna cost with, gravel? Because even with gravel, you're gonna have to do some grading and some fine tuning of what's there with, drainage and everything else, so.
Directions.
We can be a little more formal than on a napkin, but I can follow up with city staff and see if they can present an alternative option to the asphalt and that $70,000 price range. So there is a comparison so that you guys have something to base your decision on, to be fiscally responsible, but also beautifying that area and improving that safety concern. So I think that's a fair ask to go back to primarily Public Works staff to just see what they would maybe recommend as an alternative. I know the timeline on this is they just would need the surveyor out to survey the area before the snow flies this year. So we should have time yet to work through that. So I will work on that and get some more information for you.
Anybody else on Cedar Park? Move on to discussion item 5C, Let's Play Library.
All right, so Chair and members of Parks, Trails, and Lakes Commission, there's a staff memo included in your packet this evening about a potential donation to the Parks Department. So as indicated, there's a Moms Club in Forest Lake, and they've reached out to myself, interested in soliciting donations and funds to purchase a Let's Play library to have at one of the parks in Forest Lake. So this is a similar concept to the little free libraries that you see with books that it's kind of a at your courtesy, take one, leave one kind of philosophy. So this would instead have, as you can see pictured, a variety of playground equipment, soccer balls, frisbees, basketballs, etc. So kids can come to the park, and if they want to play basketball, they don't have to bring theirs with. There should be one in there, hopefully, and they are able to participate in that. So again, the Moms Club of Forest Lake would do the work to receive the donations and fund this project, just looking for permission from the city. In return, they would just want to have a little plaque on the building or the structure to recognize Moms Club and the sponsors contributing to this. So I think it's a great community item and add to our park at essentially no cost to the city. I think, it'd be great to have and encourage some active play for kids and families, or, really anybody that's at the park. So for discussion, looking to see if you're interested in one of these and if you had any park options. And I did recommend, or at least mention to Moms Club, that we'd be at this meeting tonight. But Cedar Park, I know we were just talking about the parking lot. I think could be a really good opportunity for this. One reason for that, aside from the green space that there's also the basketball court, so kids could shoot hoops. We'll add a parking lot of some kind. And this is over by the basketball court, but you'll see, if this picture pops up, just give me 1 second here. So if you see here, there's, over by the basketball court, there's actually this extra extension of what I think was supposed to be a trail sitting right there, that I think that play library, then we don't even have to pour a concrete slab. I think that could sit right in that space. It's near the basketball, it's near the open space field. There's a gaga ball pit there, so you could put a ball in there so people can play gaga ball. I don't know that there's a ball there right now otherwise. So when I saw that, I thought that might be a good opportunity to consider. And then again, you can kind of see all the space there would be for soccer and whatnot. So open to any discussion or other suggestions, but as I saw that opportunity, I thought I'd share that. So with that, if you have any questions, looking just for some discussion, and then I can go from there.
Do they provide the shed?
They would raise funds and purchase or build the shed, so there would be no responsibility for the city to do that.
But they would be asking our businesses again for donations for that. It said in here.
Yes, they would solicit the sponsorship of
Again,
that.
I look at that as maybe an Eagle Scout thing. I mean, there's not much to that shelter. But are the things inside locked? No. You're on your you're just on your good behavior.
That is the intent of that. I've seen with the library, little free libraries, there's times where it's completely empty. There's times where it's completely full. So I think that, people see that, and I'm sure, there's an opportunity down the road that Parks Commission, we could put out, if we're running low on supplies, we could probably put something out there to see if anyone had anything to donate, bring it to City Hall and restock the shed. But again, the intent is to get kids to be active and playing and be at the park longer. So when you're done playing on the playground, now you're going to maybe play basketball for half an hour and throw the frisbee around, play soccer. So I think it has a good intent, and obviously we can't control what may or may not happen with the items in there, but that's the intent with the project.
Good intentions.
Good intentions.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I mean, probably the worst for us would be a little maintenance after 5 years of the stain wearing off, or if it, if it lasts that long, or if it doesn't last that long, we've got to tear it down, so, at some point. So I think cost is minimal for us on our end. I think it's a great idea.
I think it's a good
Yeah,
idea.
I think it's a great idea also. The only one question I would have is, it's gotta be plexiglass is gonna break, so there's gotta be like maybe a thicker, like a 1/2-inch plexiglass on it.
Right.
But I think it's a great idea.
Anything to get them outside if it works.
And I
Yeah.
think, I'm sure Moms Club of Forest Lake will, with their name on there, I'm sure they'll be happy to help. I'm sure they're gonna be drawing people there and making sure it's, remaining full, or recruiting items to be donated. I think, I think that hopefully it would go well, and they'd wanna take care of it too, as we talk about looking at, people of the park that adopt a park programs, in a sense where they're gonna wanna make sure that's maintained well with their name on it, so hopefully that will go well. Do you have any thoughts on location? Does Cedar Park seem like a good starting point? And
Yeah.
There's a lot of open space there, so that
Yep.
would lend itself to that.
And that little pavement there.
That look,
Looks like it's set up for success to start, and who knows, maybe it takes off and the Moms Club wants to do another one next year.
I think
The year
keeping
after.
it stocked will be
Yeah.
probably an issue. Keeping all the balls in good shape, it'd be best if it were at a ranger park, but to pick it up, the stuff that doesn't get put back in.
Well, and you could always stencil, Mom's Club or
On the equipment?
on the
Yeah.
equipment.
But I like James' idea, because so many times garage sales where people have things that kids don't use anymore, and it would be
Right.
nice to have a spot to say, hey,
Sure.
good shape yet, put it
Yeah.
in. I don't
Rather
know
than
what,
bringing the,
yeah,
Sure. Good idea.
we'll try it.
yeah, I think that Doug, does bring up a good point, just with city mowing and everything at the park, that you wouldn't want a bunch of equipment laying around and people aren't picking up after themselves. So I think it's still a good option to try and see how that goes, and we'd have to probably really encourage, put it back when you're done, so that we don't have jump ropes laying in the grass and getting run over, or damaging mowers and things like that. So I think just kind of being transparent with the group, putting this in, if there's a way to put signage, or really encourage that things have to be returned when they're done, so.
Signage would be good. Good try.
All right.
all right. Should we move on? Number 6, Parks, Trails, and Lake Commissioner updates. You want to have anything for us?
Is this when we?
You can update about, any updates on event, if you had any committee meetings or anything.
Okay. Well, I feel bad, because the one that I met with, we have maybe different ideas about the tree lighting. And it's a good discussion to have, because a lot of it entailed the weather. And the discussion was, we've had years when that weather is so nice, you wear a light jacket. And then we have years like last year, it was an awful, awful cold one. And so the discussion that came up was, should we partner with the Masons and have them do the Santa? And we wouldn't have to pay for Santa. I was pretty amazed that we paid $350 for Santa. I don't know if that came with Mrs. Santa or not, but.
Santa and all the helpers.
Oh, okay. But, if we could do some way where we wouldn't have to pay for that, because one of the commissioners said it was pretty cold for kids to stand out there and get their picture taken with Santa. And it might be a better picture at the Mason. So the conversation went back and forth about, if you take Santa out of the park, would there be enough there to still draw people to come for a tree lighting or not? And how do we make that connection with, if the Masons are over here and they're taking pictures, the first one would be done at a certain time, but the last one would be done at a very later time. And so how do you get that times to match? And we kind of left it with everybody was going to go and rethink it because there seemed to be an appetite for something. And I did go home and think about it, and I thought, to me, the weather is not a factor for me because we've had a lot of people there last year when it was freezing cold. I don't think we'd ever anticipate a colder one than last year. So if we've had a program that has been growing in numbers from the community, I see that we wouldn't interrupt that. I mean, and I would still like the $300.50 to have Santa there, or if we're not going to have it there, to keep the sleigh ride, something with still maybe the cookies and the hot chocolate in the sleigh ride. So we could, the conversation, I think, Jamie, and help me if I'm wrong, but I think the conversation was maybe to make it, still do it, but do it in a smaller venue.
Yeah, and thank you for providing that update. So the events committee did meet and talked about tree lighting because of that potential opportunity to partner with Masonic Lodge, and setting the date for that is something we need to do here soon. So everything Karen said is spot on with what that conversation was, and let's leave and think about it. And so I know Chair Terry Steenblock did put that on social media and put that on the Forest Lake Happenings page of, what do you think? You know, have you been here before? If you have, what did you like? If you haven't been here, what would you like to see to make you come to this? What do you think about, just what date and time? I was able to look at it briefly and kind of glance over some of the general comments, which it was very well received. I think there was 40 comments on it. In summary, and I think we can summarize this and talk about it more, here soon, but I think in general, I think there was some conflict on a lot of interest for Saturday. I did see a couple people reference waiting in line for Santa was really cold. So maybe that's not a good experience for parents or families with little kids waiting in line in cold for Santa. But there was some interest in like a Saturday. Some people had referenced, maybe to add something new was the food donation, which I thought was great, or donate toys for tots kind of situation. And some people even thought of like the Saturday before Thanksgiving, which is kind of an interesting thing to think about as more of a holiday kickoff, so that you do a food drive leading up to Thanksgiving. A lot of people don't travel before Thanksgiving because of the holidays coming up, and that starts on a Thursday generally. So that Saturday before Thanksgiving came up on that feed a little bit as something that I never would have thought of or considered. So we're still kind of pondering what might be a good fit. Is it more of let's do something different like a holiday kickoff where it's maybe an opportunity to partner with the chamber and we do our tree lighting and there's specials at the forest, businesses in Forest Lake leading up to Thanksgiving and the holiday season. So that's where we left from yesterday to today, some community input around the event, and people are really excited about it. People are said it's a great event. They're excited to go. So I think we just need to nail down what that dynamic looks like.
Well, the conversation came up as well that if it's on it's always been on either the Saturday or Sunday after Thanksgiving, but that might be difficult for Jamie if she goes away to get back by a Saturday. So then it was changed to a Sunday.
It was changed. It was changed not because of that reason. It was changed because the chamber wanted to try it on Small Business Saturday,
Right.
and they didn't think that was effective to what they were looking to accomplish. So then it was changed to Sunday to try to see if that was better attended, because it wasn't well attended when it was that Small Business Saturday. It's the middle of Thanksgiving weekend that we didn't have great attendance. We did move it to that Sunday of Thanksgiving, and I think that's over the last few years been well attended.
Well, and I think it didn't come up, otherwise I'd have been more excited, because the conversation was maybe having it in December, and I kind of thought, gee, that's kind of late. And so now that you've mentioned even having it the Saturday before, that would eliminate the holiday weekend, still be on the Saturday that the people seem to think. I mean, now hearing that. And
I
then
kinda
not
like that.
partnering. I think they're two different events. I think the Masons can have their cookies and their Santa, and that's fine. People who want to go there will. And people who want to come to the tree lighting and still maybe have an opportunity to see Santa or not, but it's two different things. And so
Right.
when I got home, I couldn't combine the two somehow.
Well, I think the Saturday before
Yeah,
is a good idea.
I do too.
And, you know, if you could hook up a food drive of some sort, you know, everybody's kind of in the giving spirit anyway. That might be a good way to help the food shelf out too.
Yeah, when I saw that, I thought of there's potential with that. There's more opportunity for, it's a 1 week earlier for better weather. You know, people are generally going to be, I would think, home that weekend and not traveling out of Forest Lake. And then once you get into after the holiday in December, there's so many conflicting events.
Oh,
You
yeah.
just really get into event mode. And I think after, you know, this might be just more of a general holiday kickoff, not necessarily more specific to Christmas or, you know, whatnot, because it is a little earlier. So it could just be like a holiday kickoff event to really get everyone in the mood for all the holidays. And so I think just continuing that conversation, and I think if everyone's comfortable, the events committee, we can kind of regroup here
I think-
maybe later this week. But really looking, if, you know, I guess if anyone has any other input from the events committee update today on that, that's where we're working through those details to see what makes the most sense to invest our dollars and put on a really good, fun, well-attended community event and build on what we've developed. And I think we could keep everything that we've had, even if we change that, and maybe this will be our new norm. Maybe we'll double our attendance this next year. So,
It would be the Christmas tree lighting, the Saturday before Thanksgiving.
If you've gone in the stores, they already think it's the kickoff.
They might already.
Oh,
No, wait, no,
it's
it's
just
not. Wait, it's
sad.
a couple.
It's so sad.
No, I think it's a good opportunity to be a well-attended event. I know just personally, I travel for Thanksgiving, so I'm like many. And that Saturday, I wouldn't think of going because I'm already probably leaving Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever that looks like. So I think it's a great idea.
Yep.
We look forward to hearing more on that.
okay. And Tim, do you have another update?
I was gonna, are we gonna talk about the, what is it, Winterfest or?
You can mention that as well.
Okay, because that was the other discussion we've been having was, you know, do we, because it sounds like, and unfortunately, I haven't been in much of attendance, but, you know, at one point in time, there were some snowmobile races, both drags and oval. There've been pond hockey, there's been a number of things that have gone on, and they either are or have disappeared. And we had talked about, there are a couple of events coming up, and you know, maybe we combine it and make it like a week-long thing. I know they've had a medallion hunt, and I guess that's kind of fallen by the wayside. But if we could get maybe a plan, and so, you know, there's a daily event or, you know, something to kind of focus on. You know, whether the polar plunge is the culminating event or it's the kickoff, one way or the other, but kind of build around that so that you have a reason for people to be downtown and in and around Forest Lake. And that was just kind of another discussion of, well, what do we do? What do we choose?
It used to have more partnership with the
Right.
chamber and the school, and now the chamber's kind of opted out of that, so it's really the school that's promoting it at this point. It started with their 100th graduation.
Well, you're getting, sorry to interrupt, that, you're getting Lake Fest confused with Flake Fest. So he's talking about the winter event, the Flake Fest, where the chamber was kind of leading that initiative.
But didn't it come from the Lake Fest? They changed it to the fall? Didn't it start out like?
It's always been two separate events.
Oh, there has been. I guess I didn't attend either.
So what Commissioner Gary, that's on public record. Commissioner Gary is referring to a winter event where years ago the chamber led Flake Festival in Forest Lake. So it was a stretch of days, kind of with the Rotary Plunge as part of that. The city, you know, there was a free movie at the theater, open skating, and just a variety of items. Heavily led by the chamber in the past, and when they had to no longer be a part of that planning committee, it's kind of fallen on the city, and with resources that we have, it's difficult to plan a big community event by ourselves without any other partners. So we started to have that conversation of we need to consider a fun winter event, late January, early February, and a lot of communities do have that. So some examples, you can have, that's where people are looking for a big community bonfire. That would be a good place for that, to have a big bonfire. Some communities do like bring out dog sleds, and you can go snowshoeing. Just a variety of outdoor fun where you're going to be out in the cold and you're bundled up in your snow gear for an hour or two to, ice bowling or what have you. So if you look up other communities, they do a lot of different activities for a winter event. There was the medallion hunt. We probably have had 15 people, and probably half of them from other communities doing our medallion hunt. So it just didn't seem like a good investment of resources. So I think starting to think about how we can revitalize it and bring forward a really fun community event in the late January, early February, and what that might look like. So I think that anyone's welcome to come up with some ideas and pass them to the events committee and continue those conversations so we can get some framework started for that, because I think that's kind of something missing that would be fun. And then Karen was talking about Lake Fest.
That's, yeah, with the ducks in the little swimming pool, that thing. We were thinking of maybe if we could come up with some kid games, what would our participation be in that also? Because again, isn't that one where the chamber did not sponsor again?
Correct. So the Lake Fest is Saturday, September 28th from 10 a.m. till 2 p.m. at the park downtown, and that's in partnership with the city and the schools. So we're working together to put on kind of a fall event. So we have some programming lined up. We have Magic Norm. We have the Teddy Bear Band's coming back. The Forest Lake Dance Team. Another Dance Factory is going to perform. We have some bounce houses, kid activities, our egg drop, and I think we might do a small bonfire. And I know last year Tim was in charge of the bonfire at the park. So trying to bring in that fall.
A wind, so it was good. A little
bit of wind, under the threshold. So that's coming up at the park, and we were just looking if anyone had any ideas on any other inexpensive, fun kid activities to contribute. So that's taking place Saturday, September 28th. Thank you.
Let's start thinking of some ideas for kids' games for that and
Right.
pass them along to you guys.
That'd be great.
And the September 28th, that's also the yellow ribbon thing at Running Aces, correct? So we've got two things going on in town at the same time, okay.
Yes. And the reason for Lake Fest being that date is that last year, Lake Fest was moved to a fall event in conjunction with the Forest Lake High School homecoming football game. Several years prior, it was the first Saturday in June, and there was a lot more planned throughout the course of the week. But again, as people's roles changed and new people at the table or less people at the table, some of that programming changed for Lake Fest. There was also, so we lost some of the programming there, and also just the time of the year, that Saturday was a lot of times really rainy, that first Saturday in June. So weather was kind of posing some challenges there. But then again, last year at Lake Fest in the fall, we had 40 degrees the first weekend in October, so it was pretty chilly. So weather is just that variable. So with that, any other commissioner updates?
Thanks for your guys' updates. Hearing no other updates, looks like we're on to item number 7. I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Guess we'll go to vote, and all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Against? Abstain? Motion carries. We're adjourned.